wanted to start. That's great. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending the April Task Force on Broadband Access meeting. My name is Brittany Beyer. I'm the chair of the Task Force on Broadband. We'll do roll call in a second, and we'll go through the agenda. We have a number of special presentations, and then we're going to, again, circle back to our work and trying to get to, at this point, some of the recommendations as you saw in the homework. So at this point, I'll turn this over to Jaron to do housekeeping and roll call.
Thank you. Good to see everyone today. Again, welcome to the Governor's Task Force on Broadband Access. Today is April 13th, 2022. Just like to remind everyone that this is a public meeting and is being recorded. A meeting agenda is available on the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin events calendar. Also, in an effort to maintain audio quality, if you could just mute yourself when not speaking, that'd be fantastic. And then also any members of the public, just be mindful of your audio as well throughout the meeting. And we do have a public comment period on the agenda towards the end of the meeting. So I'm going to go ahead and do the roll call of members. If you could just let me know when your name is called, that'd be great. Brittany Beyer.
Here.
Marta Bechtel. Tom Boron.
Here.
Chad Young.
Here.
Jean Pauck.
Here.
Celeste Flynn.
Here.
Rachel Shemlin.
Present.
Brett Shepner.
Here.
Jose Martinez. Chris Meyer.
Here.
Chet Strebe.
Here.
Chris Herjong. Emily Dittmar.
Here.
Jennifer Schilling.
Here.
Andy Faust. Matthew Gabriels.
Here.
Biko Baker.
Here.
Lori Collins.
Here.
Gail Hike.
Here.
Shannon Clark.
Here.
Sal Carranza.
Here.
Justin Hebner.
Here.
State Representative Beth Myers. Or if we've got any staffers on the line, that'd be okay too.
I'm here, Leah, filling in.
Thank you. State Representative Jeffrey Mursaw. State Senator Howard Markline. And State Senator Brad Path. And then we've got Douglas Cox as well, who is a new member of the task force. So Doug, I saw that you were with us. Since you're a new member, I just wanted to give you the opportunity to kind of briefly say who you are, who you represent, and just let us know a little bit about you. Doug?
Okay, thanks, Darren. Doug Cox, I'm with the Menominee Tribe. I work in the Tribe's Land Management Department as director. Spent 6 years up to this past January on the tribal legislature. A couple of those as chair, a couple as vice chair. The tribe has been, since COVID especially, working through some funding to expand our broadband reach. We're still short significantly on it. We've got a lot of areas on the reservation here in Northeast Wisconsin that don't have service, a lot of members that just don't have communication, period. So, we're working hard at those things. So my experience and background in natural resources, I have a degree, Bachelor of Applied Studies with an emphasis in biology. I've got a minor in environmental science, and I've been working with the tribe in various other roles in natural resources, mostly for about 25 years now. So it's a really quick snapshot of my background, and I'm glad to be part of the task force and hope to help in any way that I can. So that's where I'm at, Jaron.
Thank you, Doug. Much appreciated, and happy to have you here. I think you'll be a nice welcome addition. So thanks again. We had a few missing folks. I know some people sent me emails saying that they were unable to attend. I'm just going to check for a few more folks. Chris Herjong, State Representative Jeff Mursaw, State Senator Mark Klein, and State Senator Brad Pfaff. All right. I don't think I missed anyone. I'll turn it back over to you, Brittany, unless you would like me to dive into the SharePoint update. I'm happy to do whichever you would like.
Sure, I think just handing it back over to you because that's the next item. And again, just a reminder, we're kind of turning the bend to writing the report. So, everyone should be thinking about, we're starting to think back to last year when we started to co-write the task force report. So just handing it back to you for specifics.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I am going to share my screen and I will hope to keep this brief, but I'll take any questions at the end if there are any. Can folks see that? It looks just like a screenshot. It's in the form of PowerPoint though.
Unfortunately, we don't see it.
That is odd. Give me a moment here then. Oh, I've got an error code here. Let me try that again. It's giving me an error code. Well, why don't we just bypass that for the time being? I think I can do a good job describing it myself. So for those who are returning task force members, you'll know that we used SharePoint last year to assist in the drafting, editing, and commenting, and more with our annual report. So we're reinstating that SharePoint site to, again, help with this drafting process. So in that first slide, I would have showed an invite email that you should have all gotten. It would have come from PSC staff. There's a link in there that you'll need to click to actually access the SharePoint site. So be sure to access that. And once you click that, you'll be navigated to log in or set up an account. And I'll kind of bypass the nuance of that for now. If you have any issues specific, to accessing your account or setting it up, please feel free to reach out to the PSC help desk at wisconsin.gov. And you can copy myself as well so I can help where needed. I will also say I sent the invites to the email addresses I had, but if there are any other email addresses that you would like that to be routed to, or for instance, any legislative staffers, I'd be happy to set up an account for you as well to access that. So once you've successfully logged in, you'll be brought to a screen. You'll be brought to a screen where you can see kind of the SharePoint structure, and there's a new folder structure. So there is last year's material that is archived. That's kind of read-only. You can access it and poke around and see what we did last year, but it is read-only. You won't be able to edit it. And then we have a new folder set up for this year, where we'll have a meetings folder, which will include, broken out by date for the meeting. It'll include agendas, recordings, and any small group discussion that we would have had using the Google documents that we've been doing historically. One thing I'll note is that report, we do have a report folder as well that is empty right now. Obviously, that'll be getting filled up shortly. And then we do also have a public comment folder where I upload public comments that we receive in a written format, and then task force members can review those. So we won't be using SharePoint today, but we will in the near future. So if you haven't already, I would encourage folks to go out and set up your account, get the login all squared away. Again, if you have any issues, please feel free to reach out. But I'd encourage folks to get in there and poke around and make sure that you have the account set up successfully, because like I said, we'll be using that very shortly. So just to wrap up, we do another general reminder that anything you put on the SharePoint site, you might write, add, or edit, or comment, could be accessible by members of the public. And then another reminder as well to try not to email direct links to the SharePoint documents. That just helps keeps things clean. And that's about it on SharePoint. Are there any questions? I'm not hearing any. I am going to pass it back over to you, Brittany, and I'm going to investigate this screen sharing issue that I checked and thought I had fixed, but unfortunately appears to be causing us problems. So I'll turn it back over to you, Brittany. I'll investigate this screen sharing issue and see if I can get it figured out.
Okay, thanks, Jaren. Great. So in our efforts to understand the issues of broadband access even further than we did in the first year, we've been working very diligently on the pieces of the active network that we know are in operation right now. Do we know enough about what they're doing? Who are they speaking to? How are all of these different pieces being put together, as so many communities are working with their partners and the providers to get access to all of the different pieces around the state. In our conversations as we get, we've been getting prepared for this, clearly some of the associations are part of this. Elected officials are part of this access point, right? So the League of Wisconsin Municipalities, the Wisconsin Towns Association, and actually the Counties Association as well have a role inside of this. So today I'm very thankful that the League of Wisconsin Municipalities and the Towns Association are here to talk through and do presentations about what they're doing and give you an opportunity as task force members to ask some questions beyond that. So at this point, I'll turn it over to both the League and the Towns Association. And thank you so much for being here to present about what your associations are doing.
Absolutely.
So
We're having you're breaking up a little bit, Tony, unless that's just on my end.
I'm hearing Tony breaking up as well.
okay, I'm going to turn off my video. Is this better?
It seems to be, yes.
Okay, I'm in the city of Verona, and apparently we have broadband issues. Joe, do you have PowerPoint slides? I can let you go first if you do.
I don't have slides, no.
Okay. Why don't I just throw out what I heard from municipalities, and then Joe, you can jump in and we can tag team questions.
Sure.
So again, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm sorry I can't see you. I prefer to look at people, but I wanted to let you know I did query cities and villages around the state to try to get a better perspective and understanding where we are in broadband and what their needs might be, where they feel something might be lacking, what they feel could be beneficial moving forward. So I queried our members, our chief executives, so those would be village presidents, mayors, or city managers. And we received about 80 responses, which is a pretty good response rate, especially since I was asking them to do it in like a 4-day turnaround. So we received responses from some really small villages, like the villages of Kenyon, which I think is in Price County, about 135 residents. Village of Marquette in Green Lake County, about 200 residents. Village of Deer Park in St. Croix, 250. Village of Solon Springs in Douglas County, about 670. Keep in mind the average municipality in the state of Wisconsin, city or village, not town, is about, the median size is about 1,500 individuals. We did also hear from Madison, Milwaukee, Fond du Lac, Oshkosh, Stevens Point, and some others that would be above 10,000. So a snapshot of what we heard, kind of a summary, is we do have broadband issues in municipalities across the state overall. We were expecting we might have issues just in our smaller communities, but that is not the case. We have issues all across the board. And I would say access issues all across the board. It was very interesting. The city of Milwaukee came in not only with affordability as an issue, but access really as a big issue for them. And I can get to that in a minute, but just some summaries. So that's the first one. It's an issue in all municipalities, at least those 80-ish that responded, and we represent about 600 cities and villages in the state. Rural, smaller communities had limited options, and I know if there are providers on the Zoom, they don't want to hear that competition is an issue, but that does seem to be a revolving theme. Competition would be an issue in some areas. Lower speeds, little fiber, and affordability kind of tend to be the issues in our smaller, more rural communities. I also had an overwhelming amount of respondents say that high quality, fast internet was actually considered a basic need. So I heard that theme over and over again, that this is basically a basic need, not only for students and businesses, but also just economic development and a tractor for residents and businesses moving into communities or choosing to stay in a community. One community even said that the #1 realtor question that they get is, how is your access and speed of your internet? Much with collaboration with the counties. So I thought I would hear more from cities and villages looking into broadband initiatives as part of ARPA or the bipartisan infrastructure law, but a lot of collaboration with counties, it seems like, in the spending of those dollars. So that was an important nugget. I don't think I would have necessarily generalized. Students, businesses, work from home all came out as a major theme. Affordability and digital literacy were important components of broadband across the spectrum, from our eensy beensy tiny 135 residents all the way up to the city of Milwaukee. Access, even in really big cities. I thought it was interesting. The city of Milwaukee said there are 5 census tracts in the state with 50% or more of the households with no internet access. All 5 of those tracts are in Milwaukee. 16 census tracts with over 40% or more with no access to internet. All 16 are in the city of Milwaukee. So a lot of census tracts that are just not being covered. I also thought it was interesting, the city took the opportunity to point out that from 2014 to 2022, no broadband expansion grants have been sent to the city of Milwaukee. It's been focusing more, I think, kind of on rural, middle mile. They did take the opportunity in the survey question to point that out from the city of Milwaukee's perspective. And then partnership seemed to be a really big theme. There was mentioned the United Way, Boys and Girls Clubs, obviously school districts, private businesses, and a lot of healthcare communications. So think as one of those kind of residential amenities, just having access to telehealth, work search capabilities with workforce development and training. Those all kind of rose to the surface as issues to keep in mind when we're looking at partnerships. So those are kind of my top 10 list of what we heard summarized.
Thank you, Tony. Just a question before I turn it over to Joe. The League of Municipalities is one of the principal trainers for new elected officials, right? So are there components in that training that touch on broadband as one of the items that new elected officials have to be educated upon?
At the time being right now, we don't have anything on broadband, not that I'm aware of.
Great, thank you. And Joe, thank you for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Brittany, and thank you to the task force for inviting us and having us speak here. I'm Joe Ruth with the Towns Association. I would say, I'll start out, I guess, by saying, I'd echo a lot of what Tony just said. All of those same issues, as I'm sure you're all aware, are very similar, whether it's a small city or village or a town, and we're experiencing a lot of those same issues. I'll point out a couple of the things that our association is doing on this, and then a couple of the challenges. Again, echoing what Tony said, I won't focus on those because I think she did a great job of highlighting those. Just a couple other challenges that we're seeing and we're hearing from our members. So as an association, primarily our goals so far on broadband have been to try and inform and educate our members, town official members, about what opportunities are out there, as well as helping them collaborate where we can and kind of put those connections together. So we certainly send out our email blast on our website as our first point of contact for whenever we hear about new grant opportunities, and promoting that type of information, how they can apply, what they can apply for, different rules and procedures that go along with that, and so forth. In addition to that, we do get calls in our office and emails in our office a lot on broadband. And those tend to be in a couple different similar categories, regardless of who's calling from where. Usually they're looking for either information, they heard that there was a new grant opportunity and they're looking for more information, and how can we as an association direct them in that, or they're looking for, and these have started to pick up, I think, a little more frequent as of recent, and they're looking for actual connections. They know they want to get started, but they don't know anybody. They don't know who to contact, whether it be at PSC or who to contact with an internet service provider. How do they drum up that interest from the private sector? So we've been trying to do a little more in that second kind of category where we can, of making those connections. We're somewhat limited in that capacity. We don't have all of those connections ourselves. Certainly these meetings and other similar stakeholder meetings have been very beneficial for us, and we've made some of those connections, and I'm hopeful we can continue that. But that's kind of the direction we've been heading with providing new information and help for our members where we can. On top of that, we've just, as an association at the state level with the Wisconsin Towns Association, as well as through our National Association of Towns and Townships, have been engaging with FCC and with the National Telecommunications Information Administration as well, to try and learn as much as we can so that we can answer the questions of our members as they come in a little bit better. As far as a couple of the specific needs that we're seeing, I'll just highlight, I think, as I go around the state, as other staff in our office go around the state, and as we hear these questions come in, it seems to us that there are two different levels, if I'm breaking it down into its most basic point, two different levels of town needs. And I'm imagining it's very similar for cities and villages as well, especially on the smaller end. And how we've broken that down are, there seem to be the town and town officials that they're at that first level where they haven't done anything. They don't even maybe have a clear vision. They certainly haven't applied for grants. They oftentimes don't have anybody that's an elected official or on staff, if they have any employees at all, that have the technical wherewithal to feel confident making these calls, making connections. And oftentimes they're just immediately underwater on this issue. And that's that first level of town, a town official, municipal official, that I think we see. And we would love to see some kind of resources, whether it's us, others partnering together, certainly, to try and come up with resources to help that first level. Again, just that very basic, where do you start? Where do they find information, and what will this process look like? That second level then of questions and help that we think would be very beneficial to provide is a town with a clear vision. Maybe they've had some meetings on this. The community has provided input there. They're looking at bringing broadband or expanding capacity. They've maybe even started applying for grants or digging into it, but they need those extra connections. They need the introductions to ISPs in the area, or help with filling out the grant, or whatever it might be. And I think it's going to be easier, hopefully, to help that second group, because they've already are working on their way, and they probably got a local champion that is going to understand this. But certainly that second group is coming to us as well, looking for help throughout all of this. And then there's certainly more advanced as well that might need specific issues or specific help here and there. But if they've already applied, they're already working with ISPs, they oftentimes need less hand-holding and less help from us, and then I would imagine from others as well. So I guess from a very macro level of what we would love to see provided, and certainly we're hopeful to be a part of providing whatever help that is. It would be helping and targeting both of those levels, the town officials, the local government officials that have no idea, as well as the ones that are on their way but do need some help along the way.
Thank you, Joe. And I'm going to ask you the same question. You're tasked with training new elected officials. In recent trainings, have you had broadband specific areas of concern?
No, there's same along the lines with Tony. There's nothing that I've heard along the lines of broadband with election training.
Great. I'd love at this point to open it up to all of the task force members for questions.
Brittany, this is Shannon. So maybe Joe, this is more directed to you because I'm in rural Wisconsin and deal with a lot more towns than I do municipalities, but we've had some great experience with municipalities that are welcoming broadband. Some of the towns obviously are very sparsely populated, and the idea of fiber construction in their community is new to them. As an electric utility, I understand what the relationships that we have when we work with a town to build a power line or establish right away. I can also tell you that I've worked on the broadband side with smaller townships that maybe don't completely understand fiber construction. And we have experienced everything from being welcomed with open arms to you'll go where we tell you and you will get permission for everything that's going to happen. We had one township where it wasn't particularly us, but one of the telecommunications providers said they will likely be last, if at all, just because of the resistance from the town chairman. A situation where, I'm going to ride the entire route with you. I want to be with your engineers. I want that happening before you put any stakes in the ground. And I'm not holding that against them. I understand that they're trying to be forward looking for their township, but it does seem like there's a lack of uniformity among a lot of these town boards and town chairmen as to what to expect when you're going to go build fiber there. Is there an opportunity for the Towns Association? And we don't run into this quite as much in the municipalities, although sometimes you'll get elected officials that want to maybe take a more micromanagement role in it. Is there an opportunity to provide some sort of primer to through the Towns Association or somewhere to say, if somebody comes knocking and they want to put fiber in, these are the kinds of things, you're going to have to probably read maps and not demand a pickup ride around the whole territory. Because I do see that as a barrier. And I also see communities in my area that I can fully expect that they don't have broadband today because of the barriers.
Yeah, it's a great comment. I think you're definitely right. There are over 1,200 towns specific in Wisconsin, and obviously then even more cities and villages. And there are going to be some certainly that for whatever reason I think oftentimes it's because of their lack of understanding of some of the issues that go along with this, or their lack of knowledge base with anything technological related. We certainly see that with some of our town officials, that they're, they're kind of afraid or can be fearful for what they don't understand. And so if it's something totally new to them, they might be more hesitant. But to address your question, I think there absolutely are some opportunities for us as an association to engage on that, and to maybe, and I think this falls within that first category of town and town officials that we feel need some kind of help here. As a part of that, reaching out to those towns with just the very basic level of, here's what you need to think about if you want to bring internet, fiber, broadband, whatever it might be, to your town. And a part of that, I think, certainly can and should be what you're saying, that you'll need to come, create the mindset for yourself and for your town of being welcoming for these and partnering with the providers, as opposed to being obstacles and putting up obstacles along the way. So I thank you for that comment, and absolutely, I think there is room for that, and I'll see internally here what we can do as an association as we work on materials and educational opportunities going forward.
Yeah, I failed to mention, and Alyssa put it up. Thanks, Alyssa, for the Broadband Forward program. Obviously, the very proactive townships are looking at Broadband Forward and trying to be broadband ready and welcoming. Those are great. I mean, you can tell every township that you work with that has at least thought about becoming broadband forward. Unfortunately, all it takes is one in the middle of a project, and it really slows things down. Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're certainly aware of the Broadband Forward as well, and have worked with towns on that too in the past.
Yeah, and I would just echo, the league would be willing to help with any kind of educational delivery, whether that be, helping to host something in smaller communities with the Towns Association or with PSC, or however we can work that. Getting the information out to members, I think, is critical, whether that be on grants or grant writers or potential partnerships, whatever information we can help disseminate to individuals to get them kind of thinking about or moving in this direction. We would be willing to, add some effort there.
I'll also add too, from the conversations I've had with certain town officials, and we don't often get calls or emails where it's a town that is pushing against or creating any of these obstacles for themselves, but sometimes that does come up. And in my experience, those have been because the town or the town official that's working on that, they're for towns specifically too, that a lot of what they do is their roads. And so whenever they're dealing with anything going in that road right of way, they get very protective of it. That's really their main focus as for many and most town officials, it's that road right of way. And so I guess just to give you the perspective of why they might be thinking that, or where they're coming from, oftentimes I think it's because they're just being very protective, maybe overly protective in some scenarios, of their road right away. And again, I think there is an opportunity on our end to help them overcome some of those fears as well, by giving them an understanding of the process and what the expectations they can have going forward.
Thank you. Other questions?
I would just add a question about Milwaukee. You said there were 6 or 5 census tracts that were 50% or higher, and 16 census tracts that were 40% or higher. And were there other issues there other than maybe financial, maybe like sort of not understanding the internet, maybe not having access to second language, other things that maybe digital navigators could maybe think through?
Sure. A couple of the things that the city of Milwaukee specifically put in into the survey were a big part of their initiative is not only to have broadband, but also access to devices, training and digital literacy. They also mentioned telemedicine and job training and workforce development. So having access not only to broadband, internet, high speed affordability, but also all those other things that will help residents in their community. Their thought is to partner with local healthcare providers and workforce development to kind of round out and complete their package to make it a little bit more holistic. A number of our comments too, from even small communities, 200 to talk about literacy, equity, which sorry, people
Tony, you're cutting up a little bit. And you have your camera off. I wonder if we just lost her for a second.
Yep, I'm in trouble.
I apologize that you're in an area that has a little bit of an issue with your broadband. We're trying to fix it. So let's, does anyone, I actually, Dr. Biko, I was interested in that question as well, and maybe we can connect with Tony on that offline. Any other questions?
I do, Brittany. So I don't know if it's more of a question and a comment, but in Tony's presentation, a lot of data and references, there's very little reference to any tribe's involvement or data or impacts. I know it's town and municipalities, but within those towns and municipalities are many tribes in Wisconsin. And just in Menominee's example, I can tell you that we're within the town of Menominee, and there's a lot of partnering there. For many other tribes, there's also local agreements with towns and municipalities that either benefit or can detract from the ability to get service and get counted. So, there's a gap there, and at least in what I'm hearing from the presentation, I think if it's in there and it's just not getting presented, I'd be interested to hear where that is within the data, I guess, or the presentation.
Yes, I think that's part of it. Oh, Joe, go ahead.
I'd say I don't know if Tony's still available, and certainly I think maybe she can follow up with whatever data she had. But I just had a follow-up comment that I think it just demonstrates again the communication and partnership between all of these different levels. And I know Tony had mentioned school districts and others, but absolutely tribes as well. The more communication that we can have between town, cities, village, tribe, county, school districts, et cetera, the more communication, the better, because that communication is going to lead to, first of all, better data, but also to increased partnerships. But those partnerships aren't the first step. Communication is that first step. So I appreciate that comment, and I'm hopeful that we can find ways to encourage that level of communication.
Okay, I moved locations in my house. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, so I just wanted to say thank you for that comment. And, in preparing for this presentation, I just wanted to do a quick query of our membership. So that email went out to basically mayors. And the partners that I mentioned were the partners that we received comments back from. I think that might be an indicator that maybe we as municipalities and towns and counties need to do a better job of reaching out to the tribes within our jurisdictions, because I did receive about 80 responses and I didn't have anybody mention tribes. So I do greatly appreciate the comment. Doing my master's thesis on the Menominee Reservation in sustainable development with your fabulous forest up there. I do appreciate that comment, and we'll work a little bit more diligently with our municipalities to make that connection. So thank you.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question, if anyone had a question.
I have a super quick question, Brittany, is for Joe or Tony. It was mentioned that, we have been mentioning even in our meetings in the past about the importance of partnerships. And you mentioned both United Way and the Boys and Girls Club. My question is, how was they suggested that those partnerships with those organizations be done? United Way, as you know, is mostly about funding, right? Providing funding for different organizations to achieve the goals that they have. But the Boys and Girls Club, they do have a lot of partnerships with school districts, partnerships with communities. So do you have a sense of how, and I'm involved with both, I'm on boards of both United Way and the Boys and Girls Club. It would be interesting for me to be able to go back and say, hey, this is important for broadband for these communities. How do you suggest that partnership should occur with those entities or those organizations?
Thank you for that question. I'll just jump in quick because I think I mentioned it in the partnership section. The United Way comment came from the city of Milwaukee. They're doing a partnership with United Way. It sounds to me like that's more on the digital literacy side, but I could try to make a further connection. Also, the Boys and Girls Club partnership was mentioned with several different communities in northeastern Wisconsin, maybe coming down the lakeshore a little bit. And that was mentioned as after-school programs and, again, access to devices and trying to increase their speed in their facilities so that those children, if they didn't have access at home, at least had access in that facility for the time that they spend there. So that's how it was mentioned to me in that, again, quick initial survey. I don't want anybody to think I have a lot of data or a lot of maps. This was just kind of off the cuff. Tell me what your issues are, what you're doing, what you're experiencing. And I sent it out last Thursday. So just getting some quick comments in from municipalities to help me, provide information to you all today.
That's great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I would add from an even more basic standpoint, I suppose, regardless of which organization or what they're doing, or even local businesses as well, that I think that from what we've heard from our towns where things have been successful in these partnerships, it's very helpful just to have a conversation with your local government officials about what your needs are and what specific problems you're experiencing, your organization, your business, whatever it might be, so that they can then develop a plan to best help, that local community to bring in the right infrastructure to the right areas on the right timelines, whatever it might be.
Great, thank you. Rachel has a question. Her hand is up.
Hi, great information. Joe and Tony, thank you for sharing today. I am an education consultant at the Department of Public Instruction, and I would like to just share that last April, we held a webinar for schools and libraries about ways that they could partner with their towns and municipalities for expanding broadband. And the clerk from the town of Drammen was one of the guest speakers on the session. And I'm wondering if there are more opportunities like that for schools and libraries to collaborate with the associations and share ideas about how we can work together.
Yeah, I don't know offhand what that might be, except to say that we would absolutely be interested in either participating as an association or helping facilitate that at a local level if there are opportunities there.
I also know we had, more than a handful of communities indicate that they're either trying to serve free Wi-Fi from their public library and throughout their parks, or that they would like to. And it's no coincidence that several of those communities also were asking for help in grant writing, so that they could maybe capitalize on some funding to provide free Wi-Fi for their residents.
Okay, well, schools and libraries are very interested in partnering with their municipalities and townships on expanding broadband services. So please consider encouraging folks to reach out to their local acre institutions.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that.
Great. Great. I would say we have time for one more question if desired. Hearing none, I want to thank you, Joe and Tony. We'll certainly be in touch later, because I think this is, to a certain degree, I've interacted with both of your organization and love to continue that interaction as we go forth. And obviously partnership and communicating who's doing what and where and how we can help out every corner of the state is certainly what we're trying to do. So I thank you for your time and being available to answer our questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you.
Great. So we're going to turn it over now actually to Gail Hike, who is a task force member, but she's going to be presenting on some of the work she's been doing right now on the National Digital Extension Education Association. It's another of the resources that kind of dovetails into that first part of the conversation. So I'll hand it over to you, Gail.
Hi, thanks a lot. Glad to have the opportunity to share some of the work we've been working on. Coulter is going to be running my slides, it looks like, since share isn't working. So we'll get through it. I want to talk to you today a little bit about advancing digital access and the work I've been doing with the National Digital Education Extension team. Okay, next one, Coulter. There we go. And for those of you I haven't met before, I am a professor with the University of Wisconsin-Madison Division of Extension. I work in broadband as a community development specialist. I'm the one full-time broadband specialist that Extension has. My colleague who's joined us to listen today, Chris Stark, has been working part-time in this arena for the last maybe 2 years on a part-time basis with our EDA university. So that's pretty much the staff we have right now. And we're always trying to figure out how we can extend the work that we're doing, because much of it is in this area of community networking, community development planning with broadband as the topic. Next slide. So who is the National Digital Extension team? It's a team of professionals across the country who are committed to advancing digital connectivity through research and education. So we've been working, I've been a member of the team now for 6 years, and a lot of the work that I've been doing recently has been on community planning. Next one, please. And as our team works, these are the areas as we take a look at broadband and work with communities across the country. We work in the areas of awareness, availability, access, and adoption. I know we're spending a lot of time on access, but as more and more dollars come through, we know that access isn't enough if people don't adopt and can't afford the technology. So we are spending more and more time on those as well. Okay, next. The project I want to talk to you today about is a Train the Trainer workshop. We're working on a 3-day Train the Trainer for Extension professionals. The training is being funded by the National Institute of Food and Agriculture through the Extension Foundation. We are working with the ND team as well as NDIA, the National Digital Inclusion Association, to help put forth this 3-day training for extensional professionals. The parts that we're going to be concentrating on are community organizing and planning, and educating on digital skills needed to make use of available broadband. So we have teams coming from 11 different states that will be training in May with the thought that they will go back to their states and utilize the curriculum and programming that I'll be sharing with you and tailoring it to their states. Next. So why this program? We looked at a lot of different programs across the country as we were trying to decide what type of curriculum and program to put forth. And a lot of us are doing a lot of programming without a lot of formal curriculum that people can just pick up and go forth and use. Why we're utilizing the program we are, what we did was we viewed a lot of different programs, and we selected Missouri State University System's curriculum as kind of our main framework. And because they have done this in their state on developing community partnerships for broadband and have had some experience with it, we have decided to take that model, add pieces from other states. A lot of the pieces that we'll be adding as far as activities for community are coming from Washington State University, as well as pieces that we've picked up from best business practices, mapping, business, government, nonprofits. So we think it's a great framework to put forth the curriculum. What we do know is we've got a lot of funding coming on right now, right, for broadband, and we want to make sure that communities are ready to take advantage of these opportunities. And community planning and networking is key to that. Funding programs always favor when we can leverage public-private partnerships and resources. So we want to help communities get that framework going, develop those plans to help them apply for those and be successful. And we also believe that the program helps the communities to craft something that's kind of future-proof. We want things that are affordable and reliable, but we want them to be that in the future as well. We don't want to be spending dollars that are going to be dead end. Okay, next. So the purpose is really providing training for our extension educators that can go back to their states to help build that digital divide within their states. Those programs are all going to look a little different when people come back and tailor it, but we're hoping to give them the tools and equipment that they need, the skills to go forth and move these programs faster with those tools. Community leaders and volunteers are going to go through a 5-step process. That's what our curriculum is outlined to do. We think the best thing is it's going to help them develop a comprehensive written plan, a proposal, create those public-private partnership that are going to help them leverage resources, tap those federal state dollars and private financial and human resources that are out there, and craft a solution for their community. I think those are the important things. We want them to end the program with tangible things that are going to help them be successful. Okay, next. This is what the curriculum looks like. It's basically in 5 steps. When Missouri did their program, they laid it out over a 15-week period. We know that states are all going to do it different. Communities are going to do it different. But as we took a look at 15 weeks, this was an intensive 15 weeks with a lot of people putting a lot of effort forward. We know that from working with communities, some communities work on a project for a year before they actually get an application ready, some more than that. So I think it's taking those communities where they're at, but laying out a curriculum to help them move forward as quickly as they are able. So these are the 5 different components. And I just want to walk you through the 5 components and give you a few ideas of what are in some of the curriculum that we'll be taking a look at. Okay, next. The first part of the curriculum really looks at developing that vision, identifying those community voices. I think this is when Joe was referring to those who really don't know where to start. They don't have a vision. They don't know who to bring to the table. These are a lot of the folks when I meet, just figuring out what their vision is. Who are those critical voices? How are they going to communicate? And how are they going to pull those meetings together? What's that going to look like? Some of that nuts and bolts type stuff that communities really need to get started. One of the neat things about the project and the curriculum that we're offering and the toolkit that we're creating is there'll be a template for people to write a proposal, community plan. And so each step, we're going to encourage them to take the things that they've learned and start putting it in the plan. Just like our group is going to be writing a report and figuring out how to do that, we want them to be drafting their report as they go along, so it doesn't seem so cumbersome at the end. Okay, the next one. As we take a look, then we move into some of that community outreach and engagement. And here what we're looking at, we'll be introducing community outreach publicity template plans, giving them some sample communication pieces. How do you communicate with the public, all the members in your community? One of the important things throughout the whole program is how do we engage the ISPs right up front? I think that's really critical. We want to know what ISPs are in the area, what the potential is, and what their goals are. So really encouraging them as they're taking a look at doing some of their community outreach to engage those folks right up front. Well, we're talking about how do you do community forums? How do you target, and what are the target areas you want to look at? And we heard Tony talk a lot about workforce development, economic development, healthcare, government, education. So doing some forums within those groups to figure out how they fit and who we should be bringing to the table. We'll also talk about doing community surveys, give folks some templates for doing surveys, and also a list of areas that people can go for different surveys that may help them. We'll talk about implementing a communication plan, how you analyze those survey results, and then evaluating that feedback. So, and again, going back to drafting that, how does that fit in the proposal? So the basic things that some communities might not have up front, that doing the research, we talk a lot in our committee and the governor's task force about mapping. And so bringing out all those components and helping communities identify where those maps are, if they need to create new maps, and how they need to do those surveys. Next slide. The third part that the part of the curriculum is looking at technology and resource development. Here, we're really taking a look at all the different surveys that are out there. You know, if you have an office on broadband, what are the maps that are out there, the bandwidth. We also have some tools to help people look at bandwidth requirements. So you can do some assessment. Some of the geo mapping that is happening right now with our economic development organizations. We'll be having some great mapping tools, and we'll talk about how do you utilize that. A number of our states are in that same process right now. So we want to make sure we identify that. identifying those physical resources within the community, human capital, and gathering input once again from those interested ISPs. As we take a look at those maps, take a look at the requirements, take a look at where the holes are, who are the ISPs that are now interested in some of the things that we're taking a look at? And then selecting that appropriate internet infrastructure. So we do a little education on infrastructure and the different types of connections that are out there. We know, what we heard about fiber and what does that mean and the gold standard, but that's not necessarily what's going to work in all areas. So how do we identify and look at all the different types and help people understand so they can make decisions on what's best for in their community? And then using all that data so we can move forward and draft those, add that to the report. Okay, next. The fourth area out of the fifth is identifying potential partners, looking at that public-private partnership. We spend a lot of time looking at public-private partnerships, talking about different types of public-private partnerships and coming with some kind of agreement to what those look like. Helping folks identify financial tools. That's one of the things we have a lot of questions about. Where are the grants and how do I apply for those grants? So helping folks work through those financial resources to identify funding sources that are most likely going to be beneficial for them. And then using that partnership tool to help them select various models that they may look at. Okay, next. We want to use the business and community report tool we have that will help them highlight potential economic benefits. That's one of the things that a lot of our grants take a look at. And so we want to help and provide communities with tools to help them identify those opportunities. And then once again, how do you incorporate that into their written proposal? The last section that we want to take a look at and have curriculum for is following through on the digital connected community vision. So we want to help them create the next steps. How do they assign tasks? How do they measure their achievement? How do we incorporate the proposal into the public-private partner solutions and structure? And to incorporate all those ideas into a written proposal. So the idea is we're helping people from that very beginning stage of where do we start to actually having a written proposal and then being able to go after those funds and evaluate that process. Okay, I think we have one more. So the next steps, we'll be doing training. Like I said, this training we are adapting from several trainings. Missouri has run this through individual communities, which have then had support. What we'll be doing is we have 11 teams that are joining us in May. They'll come back and tailor it to their state. Wisconsin is sending a team, which I'm excited about, looking at how we might grow our capacity. STEM states are looking at how they'll be able to use some of the new infrastructure dollars and CARE dollars to expand staff to help deliver this in all of their counties. That's something we'll be looking at exploring. How can we expand our staff to help address some of these needs? We are developing a community of practice with all the participants where each month we'll be able to come together and discuss and share other resources that other states are providing. Resource materials, templates, facilitator guides, presentations, and are all going to be part of our toolkit that everyone will be able to access online. And then we hope that we'll be able to update and duplicate the program to other states as we go forward. Each state's going to be different. Wisconsin will need to develop their plan and fine tune it for Wisconsin and figure out how we're going to implement it and be able to staff. But I think it's finally giving us some tools in hard copy that any community should be able to benefit from parts of that. Okay. Any questions? I think that's where we're at, Brittany, right?
I think so, yes. We have time for 1 or 2 questions. If there's not any other questions, I have a question, and then Lori just raise her hand. Let me, so just really quickly, you know, in this situation, like in Joe from the Towns Association side of things, when a town raises their hand for needing support, how does this work inside of it? And when do you think it's going to be, you know, it sounds like the training of the trainers will happen for Wisconsin. How does that work in timing?
Your question is to Joe?
No, to you. So Joe said that towns come to him looking for expertise.
Expertise.
Going
Okay.
to do this. How does this fit inside of this?
I think this might be one of the opportunities that we'd have to partner with Towns Association, maybe the league, to take a look at how we can beef up the training and more staff in the field. We know that WEDC and PSC sponsored those 6 pilots, but it takes a lot more time to devote to answer questions to that. So we're going to be looking at how we might beef that up and maybe partner with some of those. I think one of the advantages is we do have community staff in communities in our 72 counties and on our tribal lands. So I think they have those relationships and know some of those community resources. It's being able to get folks up to speed and having enough time for someone to dedicate to work on broadband, because a lot of these timeframes come up rather quickly and the projects are very intense and require a lot of meetings. And so will require staff who have some dedicated time to spend on that.
Great, thank you. Lori, your question.
Thanks, Brittany. Gail, my question kind of ties in with this, and so maybe you've already answered it, but my question is, will all of the counties around the state have an opportunity for their towns to go through this program? As a provider, I find that there are a lot of towns who are still at Joe's level 1, and it can be really difficult to create that relationship and that partnership and get the whole ball rolling. So I'm just curious if this is going to be statewide at some point.
Well, we don't know what we'll have statewide. I think it's going to depend on staffing. Our program manager, Benoit Jacobs, is excited about looking at the project. Brandon Hofstad, our program manager from Economic Development, is supportive. We are sending a team, Brandon and Carl Green, who works with our local government group from Extension, will also be going as part of the Wisconsin team. We are in the process of hiring a digital equity specialist and hope to have them involved. But how we can extend it is going to depend on when our team comes back and how we figure out if we have the resources to staff that. And we're, like everyone else, are going to be searching for how to expand resources in order to have enough staff to do that. Because right now, staff, I'm the one full-time staff. Chris works part-time. And we do have educators in the communities, but they also do everything from housing to childcare to economic development, workforce development. So we have to figure out how we're going to beef up our support, I guess.
Great, thank you. Thank you everyone for your time. We have one more presentation. We're kind of in the content heavy part of exploring some of the resources at this point. So we're going to turn it over to Lead for America to talk about the American Connection cohorts.
Great, thank you so much, Brittany. Thank you, Wisconsin Task Force, Governor's Task Force on Broadband for having me here. I'm calling you currently from Chicago, but my hometown and where I am based out of is Waseca, Minnesota. So it's great to be speaking with a fellow Midwest neighbor just over the border. I've also just really enjoyed a lot of hearing the themes that have been coming out so far. So I'm so glad I could join right at 1 o'clock and hear a lot of these great stories. I think it's a perfect segue, great agenda writing, Brittany, because a key theme I heard from this last presentation was around I think the quote was needing to beef up our teams. And that is my hope of what I can share of a model that we have piloted this past year, and which we hope to bring to more states and more communities as soon as this fall. So that's my preview. To take a little bit of a step back, I am one of the co-founders of Lead for America, and I am the executive director of what we've launched called the American Connection Corps, in partnership with Lakes and the American Connection Project. Real quick on who we are, where we're based, what we've done. The first slide here is this movement of homecoming. So if you want to click on the next slide, it gives a definition I really love, coined by Wes Jackson, made popular by Sarah Smarsh. Says that homecomers are residents and advocates who remain committed to places where society and the economy would have them get out. They are preserving and strengthening the vibrancy and inclusiveness of small towns, rural lands, and misunderstood communities that headlines claim are dying. I have this as the opening slide to share just a little bit about who I am and the mission of Lead for America. As I mentioned, my family's hometown is Waseca, Minnesota. I would be very impressed if anyone on this call knows where Waseca is. It's situated right in between Mankato and Rochester, a rural community about 10,000, which I have come to learn as the county seat. We are not a small town for many. But I returned back to my family's hometown after going to college out east in Boston. And our mission at Lead for America is to support the next generation of civic leadership in places where, again, Coulter, I love that. Yeah. But we're here to support that bench of leadership, other homecomers, like myself, like our founding team, who see worth in these places that most of our colleges told us that to be successful, you had to head to a handful of cities. And so Lead for America was founded to address the brain drain, to connect the next generation of leadership to their community's most pressing challenges. And so since founding in 2018, we have supported over 250 fellows across 35 states on returning back to their hometowns to work on issues ranging from housing affordability to childcare access to growing digital ecosystems and creating arts-based economic development initiatives, really the full gamut. We've also supported fellows in returning back to their tribal nations. So here in Minnesota, we work with, we've sent fellows back to Fond du Lac, Mille Lacs, and White Earth Nations, nationally, also Monument Valley, Utah with the Navajo Nation, and out to Montana with the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes. So pretty expansive in terms of reach. Where I want to focus in on this conversation with this group today, the next slide, Colton, would be, oh, thank you. Yeah, here's just some of the, I need to update this slide. This was from last year. So from 106, we have actually now expanded to about 250 fellows, 35 states. The next slide zeroes in here on the American Connection Corps. So we launched this past August a partnership with Land O'Lakes. You may be familiar that Land O'Lakes, their CEO, Beth Ford, launched a listening tour about a few years ago, working and listening to all their farmer co-ops and trying to understand what were the most pressing challenges facing the future of their farms. And time again, the common theme was access to broadband. Since that listening tour, they spearheaded a coalition of about 150 companies, education partners, and nonprofits to advocate for the $65 billion of broadband infrastructure. So when we launched this initiative, that $65 billion hadn't yet passed, but that was one of the key purposes of this coalition group, the American Connection Project. One of the key themes that emerged from that coalition, and especially with Land O'Lakes' relationship with local co-ops, is that they realized a lot of this federal coordination was happening, but townships and counties where they needed it most were often the most understaffed to be able to prepare the grant applications, do the speed mapping to get much more accurate data than the FCC maps could allow, be building coalitions and organizing meetings with providers. A lot of that needed work to then even be ready to submit a grant and make sure that money comes down to the places that need it most. And so that's what has led to, in this next slide here, the introduction of American Connection Corps. So we launched a pilot initiative where in our hometown fellows model, we would have a sub-track of fellows who are focused on broadband infrastructure development, as well as the digital adoption and digital inclusion. So you'll see here that, part of our mission is to change the narrative about these communities, that these are places where there's opportunity and dynamism, and that the next generation can make a home in. The second piece here is the project scope that fellows work on. So again, that can span from the infrastructure development side to implementing train the trainer programs around digital literacy with the local library, actually partnering with PCs for People, that's one of our host sites, in getting affordable devices to people who most need it. And then equity and entrepreneurship too. So also encouraging fellows that beyond their fellowship with the American Connection Corps, that they would also stay in their communities. And some have of our fellows have started businesses, nonprofits, community groups, and other initiatives that span beyond the timeline or the duration of the fellowship themselves. I'm so excited to be sharing this, or going after an extension educator as well, because we have launched this American Connection Corps across 16 states. One of them is in partnership with Indiana with Purdue University. And so all of their fellows are supported by Purdue and doing the same work. Part of this national coalition gets training from national partners, as well as with Purdue University's community and regional development. So Roberto Gallardo has been a professional hero of mine, and it's been really exciting to also get to work with him and their staff in expanding the Corps to Indiana. The next slide can share, what is it that we measure? This is a beast of a slide. I won't linger on it here, but just to share, on the left-hand side are things that just with our fellowship structure, what are the things that we're also measuring for a successful fellowship? On the right-hand side are kind of the two buckets of development and digital inclusion and adoption. And so we've been monitoring the success of fellows there. To show some anecdotal data, so we launched in August of this past year. So it's been, I suppose, about a little over 6 months of 50 fellows in the field. The next slides here will share some stories of who are these fellows. So you can click the next slide, Colton. Thanks. So Ken Edwards is an example of one of our fellows in Nebraska. I'm gonna link here a few links for further reading and inspiration. The first link here is a podcast that he did with Land O'Lakes. And Ken was responsible for doing the mapping initiatives. Oh, thanks. Yeah, you don't have to play right now. But Ken was responsible for doing the mapping initiatives that was able to have fiber broadband, a $2 million fiber broadband project expanded to some of the most rural parts of Southeast Nebraska. And what I love, this is a quote from the podcast as well, is that he is from rural Nebraska himself. After graduation, he says, before this program, positions like this didn't exist. With the American Connection Corps, we're getting out in the community. The service work we're doing is bigger than ourselves. We're doing work that needs to be done. Rural communities are important. We're not going away. We're standing here. We're defying the odds, and we're going to bridge that digital divide. The next fellow that I wanted to share, so the next slide here, is Patrick Gary out in Redwood County, so Southwest Minnesota. They are number 87 out of 87 Minnesota counties in terms of access to broadband. He's partnered here with a local farmer that advocated for their county EDA to have more capacity, so to be the right-hand person. Patrick's the right-hand person to the county EDA director, and has been I think he just put out an order to get 1,500 yard signs that say Redwood County is ready for its fiber future. And so they have 6 months in 2 grant applications that as soon as those grant applications go live in Minnesota with the state broadband office, grant office, they're ready to hit submit. But in preparation of that, as you all know, there's a 30% local match, and he's working with commissioners that, you know, when looking at what are all the infrastructure spending needs, roads, sewage, broadband, there's definitely also a culture shift that's necessary there as well. So he's doing education with farmers, business owners, and getting people who support this fiber future to actually put the lawn sign in front of their homes to raise that public awareness. So again, just an example of Patrick's work. The American Farm Bureau Federation President Skippy Duvall had a very fun podcast interview with Patrick and Bruce. Tiffany, who's the farmer pictured here. If you watch to the end, you'll hear one of his biggest piece of advice to keep Patrick was to make sure he gets married and fills his house with children, as he says. So that in his deep Georgia accent. So it's a fun listen if you want to hear more of his story. And then the last fellow story I'll share as well from, again, just the past 6 months is Liz Lima. One of our funding partners is Heartland Ford, and they've been supporting fellows in Ohio, Illinois, Arkansas, and Tennessee. And Liz actually created a tool with Rural Disc to show out of all the eligible households, or households eligible for the emergency broadband benefit, now called ACP, who was actually enrolled in it. So you could actually target your outreach on who needs to get enrolled into this program based on her mapping. So she has it down to down to the local level of seeing where those gaps are, and had an opportunity to brief the FCC on what this tool was and how to use it for their work nationally, as well as with local organizations locally. So with that, I'll pause and make space for questions. I'll put my contact information in the chat as well. The ask, and in terms of, I know there's questions around timeline. It's awesome to see you all seeing the certification process, even for your townships and municipalities, is super exciting. It seems like so much groundwork has been laid. I'd say this program is, we are actively seeking host partners, both for this second year of the pilot, as well as for hopefully an expanded program of the American Connection Corps to further to even more states. But we are recruiting currently for candidates, and training begins in August, and service work begins in August in their host site placements. One of the key learnings or things that we're adapting from this past year of the program, we focus primarily on ages 21 to 30, which has been typical of our fellowship program. So those homecomers, kind of recent college graduates. We have found that there's been interest from folks who didn't go to college but are interested in the technical fields. And we are an AmeriCorps program, which is a huge blessing, and also gives us and the fellows a lot more workforce development opportunities, such as an education award, where it actually can help give them money for any college education as well, or if they have student loans, it can, while you serve, you don't pay them, and you also get an education award at the end of your service. So benefits like that. But we, in this upcoming year, are excited to expand the scope of eligibility. So not just recent college graduates, but people might be graduating from high school that are interested in this, people coming into retirement, people taking sabbaticals from, you know, their tech careers, and wanting to really be a local broadband advocate. So yeah, I'll pause there and open up for questions if I can be helpful at all.
Thanks, Benya. Questions? I guess I'll ask a really quick question. I feel like there's a couple of different pathways into supporting a fellow at the local level. Can you describe how, so you have state initiatives, but can a community elect to have a fellow itself and be a part of a program still, and what's inside of it if they do it by themselves as a community?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, individual communities can host fellows. So our organization will work with you on that. I think what is helpful with like building out, you know, the state infrastructure for this is that we can have, you know, UW Extension do that training program for any of the fellows serving in their state. So there's just some additional layering training opportunities there. But nationally, we also provide a week-long orientation at the start, and monthly, and we're looking at now actually increasing it to bi-monthly or bi-weekly plenaries that are bringing in some national trainers as well, so that again, fellows get that training and access, but also feel like they are part of a larger cohort too. So Brittany, to answer your question, if any community here is interested in hosting a fellow, just feel free to send me an email. I've put my address in the chat and happy to work with you all. And again, as I know, this is the state broadband task force. Happy to also look at what would it mean to, you know, create the statewide structure as well to support additional fellows.
Great, thank you so much. Great, so we're rounding the last half hour of our time together today. I'm going to hand it over to Kristen for, you know, our group conversation, the questioning together as we figure out what we're going to have as part of our report, which is right around the corner. So I'll hand it over to you, Kristen.
Yeah, that time is coming shortly, isn't it? And as we hope that spring will arrive soon and bring some consistent sunshine, at least, we'll also be thinking about writing the report and wrapping up our work together in a couple of months. So I am going to paste the link today to our document, our Google document that we've been using over the past couple of months. And this will contain our group work today. And just as a reminder, this is a public document. So whatever we write on here is publicly accessible. It is taken down within a day or two after the meeting is done and preserved and sent to the PSC because it is a public record. So those of you that are participating in the call can always access it in that way to see what you have written or to see what has been written as we are starting to think about writing the document again. So it is a Google document. I do want to draw our attention to the answers to the homework. So today we'll go over the answers to the homework quickly. And then rather than doing our traditional question, report back, we'll discuss both questions in one solid time block and have a single report out, because as we're looking on the call today or the Zoom today, it does look like there are a lot of people in our audience. So we'll try to leave at least 10 minutes for public comment at the end of the day today. So with that, if you are looking at the document, go to slide 14, and I'm going to screen share today. And if you are seeing my cursor circling a slide that's not quite in presentation mode, then we are exactly where we need to be. So we had two separate homework questions this week, and I combined them both. As a reminder, the truncated version of the question is that we based this year's discussion on community network development. What should our recommendations be? That was our first of 3 questions. Our second question was, a lot has happened over the course of the past year between last year's task force and this year's task force starting up. Are there recommendations from last year that have taken on an increased salience or an increased importance? Is there anything that we need to evaluate? These 2 were separate answer blocks. I combined them into a single set of answers, which we'll go over in a second. And then our third question is at the end of the slides, and that's word for word. That's a little bit more involved. That one was not sorted as the next 2 questions were. So what I did with our answers, and thank you for everyone that participated. We had, again, outstanding participation this month, and I really appreciate the time that everyone is taking to think about these answers and complete them in advance of our meeting, because I think it helps our discussion go quickly, and your answers are very insightful always and really useful. So I combined and sorted questions and identified some common themes. Now, these aren't necessarily the best names for the themes, but maybe along the lines of what people are thinking. So one of the first themes that emerged from those 2 questions was continuity. We had a strong indication in quite a few answers that the work that we started last year as the task force should be continued. So that we should be building on the success we've already had last year, but that also the continuity we should be looking for, we should be looking to our communities, using some of the data that we've gathered as part of the process of forwarding the cause of broadband, through evaluating some of the work that's been done at the state level and identifying what's working there. And then also recognizing that there are communities who've excelled at this. Many communities are at the start of that learning curve, of course, but there are some communities that have excelled, and that maybe we should look at what those communities are doing and how we can continue their success. So that was one of our first themes. Second theme was mapping. Mapping, almost everybody that answered this question mentioned mapping in some form. So statewide mapping of middle mile has been identified. Some of these answers, if you're reading them very close, and I don't expect that we'll have time to, you might come back and read this, you'll notice are going to appear across a couple of different themes because they kind of fell in more than one category. So we talked about mapping in a number of different ways in terms of where is the network now? Where are we in terms of knowing and understanding where fiber has been laid? And then the second are resource and state organizational maps. So not necessarily in terms of where is the fiber in the state, but where are the resources and the organizations that we need to connect and map. Also along mapping, developing digital dashboards and data tools that can serve communities well when they get to the portion of their applications and their process. Third question, I'm going to go through these rather quickly because I am keeping an eye on time. So network building. So we talked about networks in a couple of different ways. And if you're reading these answers carefully, you'll notice that there is a clear indication that we should be speaking about networks in terms of not just physical infrastructure, but also in terms of community networks and the connections we need to make between organizations. So keeping an eye on those 2 things, but also being clear when we're using the term network of which type of network are we talking about. Resource development, and again, here we see some mention of mapping. Middle development needs to be a priority for KECTA and middle mile. We need a defined plan on how broadband infrastructure. So in terms of, we know this money is going to be coming down the road from the federal government, and let's organize and plan. Again, developing dashboards that can serve as better tools, developing models of multi-county projects, all things that we've talked about over the past few weeks that we're starting to see kind of coalesce around some themes. Technical assistance was our second biggest category that we had. When we talk, and this again is a theme that we've consistently had over the last several months, the technical assistance is needed at all levels, and understanding that different levels, whether they're talking local, regional, ISPs, everybody could benefit from some sort of assistance in building these human networks that are connecting our organizations together, as well as the actual process of deploying broadband. Question number 3, I didn't organized these because I thought the answers really deserve to be read in whole. And we won't go over them now, but as you go into your groups today, know that these slide answers are at the end of the presentation, so you're free to refer to them as a group. Some very thoughtful answers here with a lot has happened over the course of the last year. Is there anything that we need to talk about or increase or surface as it's increased in salience? So with that, today's instructions, we're going to go over 2 different questions. And so we're going back to the homework as we have traditionally done. We've based this year's discussions on community development. What should our recommendations be? So let's dig into that a little bit more deeply. And second, a lot has happened over the course of the past year. Are there recommendations that we should be talking about that have taken on increased salience? And with that, Jaron, I'll hand it over to you as you send us into our individual groups.
Thank you, Kristen. So we have PSC facilitators for each room. We've got 4 rooms. When they open, they'll automatically direct you over there. So how long do we want to leave about for folks, for the groups?
I think we want at least 10 minutes
Yeah.
at the end. So let's come out of the groups at 2:48. That would leave 10 minutes of discussion, roughly 10 minutes of discussion, and then 10 to 12 minutes to wrap up with comments. Does that sound good, Brittany?
That sounds good.
Excellent.
All right, I will open up the rooms now then. And task force members should automatically be redirected. But if there are any guests or PSC staff or members of the public that would like to be put in one of the rooms, I'd be happy to do that. Just let me know. Otherwise, you're free to stay here and wait till we do our large group report out, whatever you'd like. Just let me know.
Hey, Jaron, Rory here. Happy to be thrown in whatever room just to sit in and participate as best I can.
Sure. I will stick you in room 3 with Kath then.
Thanks.
Hey, Bill, this is Ramsey. I'm a member of the public who's listening. I'm happy to be thrown in whatever room you feel is appropriate.
All right, I will, one moment here. Rory, there. All right, and the member of the public who just spoke, I will stick you over right now.
Okay.
If anyone else, oh, I see a comment. All right. If anyone else wants to join, just let me know. Otherwise, whatever you'd like to do is totally fine.
I'll just be here, Jaron. Thanks.
Okay.
This meeting is being recorded.
Welcome back, everyone. As I was watching the Google document, the words were flying and things were filled out very rapidly. We gave you a very challenging task for 10 minutes. So I appreciate everyone being game for it. Let's do our report out and let's start, maybe let's go in order today. Let's start with group 1. Group 1, what would you like to report out?
That's my group. I would invite anyone to volunteer if they wanted. I forgot to ask for a volunteer. I'm just going to run right into it actually for time. We talked about a lot of need for mapping, and then also that a lot of mapping has improved greatly, that we have much more granular and that we've been moving. So both that it's still a high need, but that there's been an incredible amount of progress there. And then there was some discussion on our team about kind of the role of competition and the balancing between competition and a level playing field, and really continuing encouraging the task force to look at those speed and broadband performance goals and what's the state want to set for the state, and that 25.3 is probably maybe not where the task force wants to be or wants to And maybe I can pass it to two and let other people share what their discussions.
Sounds good. I think we were concerned about having duplicitous answers, and so far that's not the case. So I'll try to be quick. A couple of the big take homes that came out of Group 2's discussion focused on an emphasis of getting a better understanding and potentially investment in middle mile infrastructure so that that network is more robust across the state. Thinking about how our recommendations are going to roll out this year in general. There were multiple comments along the lines that Kristen's organization of topics so far seems to work really well and will be a great framework for recommendations. Another big recommendation that came out of our discussion is really the need to get closer to having identified local champions, or thinking back to the AmeriCorps presentation, folks who can work for those local champions and step in that role to really support what's going on in our smaller communities here in Wisconsin. Those were big things, and maybe for the sake of being quick, big changes, you know what, we're going to just move on to Group 3 because I really rattled through those last couple bullets I put on. Group 3, take it away.
There we go. So with Group 3, we had some screen sharing issues, so I've got all the notes. So that'll save you guys from having to report out. So we did talk about that we need to identify what we mean by the word community. You know, who are we going to be communicating with? Organizations, businesses, individuals, schools? You know, identify what we are doing and why, etc. We also felt we need to define what network means. You know, are we talking about network of people, or, you know, the network that provides the service? And as far as human network requirements, you know, improving access, improving adoption, you know, requires a lot of different groups to remain in communication. And while the state and the feds have brought the dollars, you know, as an ISP, the difficulty is getting groups to talk together. You know, people just want to call somewhere, you know, they want to have a number, just like a one-stop shop where they can call. And then we talked about the things for increased importance or increased salience was technical assistance, the know-how. That one-stop shop was real important for our group. And then the importance is not just about access, but it is about adoption. So Group 4.
You stole our main topic here, Group 3. But I would say, I think the main kind of recommendation that kind of emerges having a clear definition of what community area network means. And it seems that there are clearly two ways to interpret it. A possibility would either be defining one and create strategy around that definition that the whole group can agree upon, or even having both definitions and have a clear strategy related to each of them. From the ISP perspective, clearly community area network means something different than human capital network. And I think it's important to clarify that. I don't think we have done that particular distinction back in the original recommendation of the last year. So I think that would be a good improvement. One of the things that I was saying that in structurally, this in the state, there is a very disjoint way to approach this problem. I like this term, disjoint. And it would be very nice to streamline this process and have all the many organizations in the room. One ISP said, we have been invited in many different groups and never get everyone on in the same room. That would be maybe very helpful. So this may be another type of organization, creating an ISP network within them that they can communicate and share best practices. So this is our group.
Excellent discussion, and the notes are fantastic. We will be preserving all of these and using this material along with the homework for the next round for the basis of our discussion. And I think we're really surfacing some really important points. So thank you for the work today. With that, Jaron, I'll turn it over to you so we have time for comments.
Sure. Just a couple procedural items. Next meetings are May 11th and June 8th. They're both from 1 to 3 p.m. Stay tuned for an agenda for that May 11th meeting. I will open it up for public comment now. I would say the members of the public are free to unmute and make a comment. I would just ask that the public comment remain somewhat brief and also pertain to the issue or subject of broadband access. So if you would like, you can go ahead and unmute and make a public comment. I will ask now.
Jaren, I see the phone number has the hand up.
Sure. Please feel free.
Okay. First of all, my name is Sam TV. I want to thank the task force for its hard work. I'm speaking today as a private citizen in terms of broadband access. Up here, where I live here in Hudson, Wisconsin, we're okay, but one of the issues coming with broadband is affordability. We're okay here in Hudson, but when you go to Aspen, only way up north in Wisconsin, there's limited access to broadband. So that should be considered. And also, if a person is on Medicaid or some type of assistance, we need to make sure that access is affordable for people that are on low income. And I have Lawrence Brown on the phone with me from South Milwaukee. Larry, did you have anything?
Yeah, I think we need a form network to make more channels available for internet access, especially for low income. 384 kbits per second upload is for cable only. For telecom networks, it's different. So the FCC might need to get involved with that, and making it affordable access internet in Milwaukee is available for $5 and $10 a piece. In rural areas, it's not available. So we need to think about making those available and making them available at faster speeds, like was discussed in our breakout group at faster than 384 kbits per second up, which is not broadband. And nowadays, it's not sufficient for doing even email, rich email type of HTML messages on email alone. So those are my comments and those are my thoughts. We're going to need a lot of communication between stakeholders in this bid for more bandwidth and more allocation to make it more accessible for those in rural areas and in certain challenged areas. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you. We appreciate those public comments. Any other public comments? Last call for public comments. Thank you. I would just also mention that we do accept written public comment on an ongoing basis, and the instructions on how to do that is on the task force webpage. Brittany, I will turn it over to you for any final words and adjournment.
Great, thanks, Jaren, and thank you for the public comment. I think all of us are really paying attention to the affordability and making sure that access is as broad to every single person in the state of Wisconsin and all of the businesses as well, and really powerful comments about how much data is needed in order to communicate it. I really brought that. It really makes it touches my heart. So we are at time. I think everyone is keenly aware that we're kind of working towards those recommendations. My group especially had that feeling of we're also crystallizing about what are the topics and how we're going to start shaping our report. So stay tuned for more information related to that. And I really appreciate your time and energy in listening on this issue. And of course, my virtual door is always open if you would like to reach out and have conversations. But otherwise, thank you for your time, and we will meet again shortly. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
all.
Thank you.